Morning, guys. In Matthew 22, reading from verse 15 to 22. Just a bit of context. Pharisees and Herodians come and try to trap Jesus. They're furious. Jesus has overturned the tables. He's cursed the fig tree. He's implemented them in so many ways. He's called them out. Some of the harshest words of Jesus are towards them. And so they want to trap him, and so they try to use the poll tax that they've got to pay every year to Caesar, showing that Caesar is in control and not God in one sense, and they're under his power and dominion. And most of the people hated that. The interesting thing is that the Herodians supported Caesar, and they supported the poll tax. And so there are two groups now that have come together, the Herodians and the Pharisees, and they now are going to try use a common goal to come and get Jesus. Most of the people didn't like the poll tax, so not just the Pharisees and scribes and most of the Jews. In fact, in 86, which is only 6 years after Jesus died, Josephus talks about an account with Julius of Galilee, a revolt that happened, where Judas taught that paying tribute to Rome was close to slavery and disloyalty to God. And so this aspect of choosing God or the government has always been, and even today, it's always a contentious issue. So let's read it in Matthew 22, verse 15. The Pharisees went and plotted together how they might trap him and what he said. So they watched him. Luke, this is interesting. In Luke, the account in Luke, it says they watched him, verse 20, Luke 20:20, and sent spies who pretended to be righteous in order that they may catch him in some statement, so that they could deliver him to the rule and authority of the governor. So this was a proper plot with spies that were sent out, pretending hypocrites, as Jesus calls them. Verse 16, and they sent the disciples to him, along with the Herodians, so both groups, saying, Teacher, we know that you are truthful and teach the way of God in truth, and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any. And so they butter him up, they flatter him. In Proverbs 29, verse 5, it says, a man who flatters his neighbor is spreading a net for his steps. In the ESV, it says, plotted to entangle him with his words. And that's what often the flattery has got intentions behind it. You must always be careful of flattering lips. The Bible warns of that. And here we see the Pharisees starting off by flattering Jesus. In verse 17, they say, tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to give poll tax to Caesar or not? It's interesting that this image on the tax that they had to pay every year for just being there had a picture of Caesar. And so they, the Ten Commandments talk about don't make any graven image of anyone. And then underneath on the coin it said, the son of the divine Augustus. And so he was almost like made this divine figure that needs to be worshipped. And this was an absolute disgrace to the Jews and the Pharisees. And so they didn't want to bow their knee to Caesar. And so even in Mark it says, why are you testing me? So Jesus straight up knows that this is a trap. He's been tested. It says in verse 18, but Jesus perceived their malice and said, why are you testing me, you hypocrites? He adds that word, you hypocrites. Now that word gets repeated over and over again. Even if we jump to Matthew 23, 5 times in chapter 23, he says, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. He says, he keeps repeating that. And that's, he sees straight through their heart, their trap. They don't do what they say. In verse 23 says, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, but you've neglected the weightier provisions of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. And so they didn't obey the law. They were just trying to, on the outward, obey it. Anyway, Jesus says in verse 19, "Show me the coin used for the poll tax." And they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" And they said to him, "Caesar." Then he said to them, "Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And so we, in this world, we're under a government, and even though our government may be corrupt, we still need to obey the government that God has put in place, but we cannot obey it to the detriment of obeying God. We first obey God. God has made us, we're in his image, we bow to him only. So wherever there's a case of having to, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, worship a foreign god or do something that's contrary to the Bible anyway, we cannot obey. But outside of that, even if the government's corrupt, we still pay our taxes. And it's amazing how they were amazed when they heard this, and then they left him. They had no answer. And so even today we have contentions around this issue, but we are called to obey the government in every regard, except if it tells us to go against what the Bible has said. Amen.